Imagine placing the fate of a nation or a patient on an operating table into the hands of someone whose mind is quietly shutting down. On September 26, 1983, Soviet officer Stanislav Petrov sat in a bunker as early warning systems screamed that American nuclear missiles were inbound. Protocol dictated an immediate counterstrike, but Petrov noticed an anomaly. The system only showed 5 missiles. He deduced that a real preemptive strike would involve hundreds. His cognitive clarity to recognize a satellite glitch saved the planet from nuclear war. Contrast that sharp judgment with Air India Express Flight 812. In May 2010, this plane approached Mangalore. The captain had been sleeping for much of the flight. Waking up in a state of severe sleep inertia, his degraded brain failed to process his co-pilot's repeated warnings to abort the landing. The plane overshot the runway, killing 158 people. 5 years later in the UK, a 70-year-old surgeon refused training on a new robotic surgical system, citing his 4 decades of experience. During a routine heart procedure, his cognitive inflexibility, trembling hands, and poor decision-making led him to tear a vital wall in the patient's heart, resulting in a fatal outcome. These individual failures are symptoms of a wider biological decline. In India, researchers are documenting a sharp rise in early-onset Alzheimer's, with 30-year-olds presenting the cognitive profile of someone double their age. This makes cognitive health a silent, large-scale threat to public safety. To understand how this happens, look at how a healthy brain secures information. When you see something, your optic nerve acts like a live electrical wire, firing that visual data straight to a routing center called the thalamus. From there, the information moves to the amygdala, which stamps it with an emotional weight, like fear or satisfaction. Finally, the hippocampus acts as a file manager, locking that stamped memory into permanent storage. When you repeat an action, the brain wraps these neural pathways in a protective layer called myelin. This creates a paved biological highway, allowing you to make rapid, automatic decisions without thinking. But our current routines are tearing up those highways. It starts with sleep deprivation. Deep sleep is the only time your brain activates its waste clearance system. If you consistently sleep 5 hours a night, that garbage physically builds up in your head. Combine that with chronic stress, which floods the hippocampus with a damaging hormone called cortisol. Add in heavily processed diets that kill off the healthy bacteria in your gut, severing the crucial communication line between your stomach and your brain. The biological result is devastating. These habits, alongside urban air pollution, allow sticky proteins, known as amyloid plaques and tau tangles, to form. They coat the outside of your neurons and twist their internal supports, physically blocking electrical signals until the brain cell dies. We are systematically dismantling the physical infrastructure of our memories, stripping away the mental sharpness required to navigate high-stress environments. If our brains are deteriorating this rapidly, we might expect a reliable pharmaceutical defense to be in place. Instead, the global medical community spent 16 years building its research on a foundation of fraud. In 2006, neuroscientist Sylvain Lesnay published a study in Nature claiming a specific chemical caused Alzheimer's. The findings were manipulated. Independent investigators eventually discovered that Lesnay had edited lab photographs to create the appearance of a consistent breakthrough that didn't exist. Based on this fraudulent study, the National Institutes of Health poured tens of millions of dollars into funding the work, turning Lesnay into a leading authority in the field. When the fabrication was eventually identified, the NIH faced an institutional dilemma. Openly admitting that public funds had supported a fabrication for over a decade threatened to compromise the agency's reputation and dissolve public trust in medical research, so the funding continued. Pharmaceutical companies had already sunk billions into developing drugs based on this data. Under pressure to recoup these costs, the industry pushed regulatory agencies to approve medications that were linked to this flawed science. The result was drugs like Aduhelm, a highly expensive treatment sold to patients despite a lack of clinical evidence that it could actually reverse cognitive decline. With the primary research line retracted, the medical safety net is thinner than we realize. Protecting our own cognitive clarity is a personal necessity. Your immediate defense requires going back to biological basics. You need 7 to 8 hours of sleep to physically wash the waste from your brain. You need whole foods to restore your gut bacteria, and regular exercise to maintain blood flow. If you are over 35, you should seek out proactive cognitive testing. Simple evaluations like the mini mental state exam or an Alzheimer's biomarker blood test can detect the physical signs of decline up to a decade before you forget your keys. But personal health is only half the equation. We have to figure out how to protect society from people in power whose minds are quietly failing. The logical step is mandatory, regular cognitive screening for high-risk professions. Surgeons, air traffic controllers, military commanders, and politicians must have their brain health verified just like any other vital metric. We require commercial drivers to pass eye exams. We require soldiers to pass physical fitness tests. Verifying the mental clarity of the people who control nuclear arsenals and perform open-heart surgery is a basic requirement for public safety. We live in an environment that damages our neural pathways, backed by a medical system that has struggled to correct its own errors. Defending our mental clarity is the only way to safeguard a future where our most important decisions are still made with total clarity.